Hey everyone, it's Horror Free for All, and I hope everybody's having a great day so far today. This review is going to be continuing on with the Patrick Lussier and Todd Farmer trilogy of sorts that began in 2009 with My Bloody Valentine 3D, continued on in 2011 with Drive Angry, and then ended, as of recent, with 2019's Trick. Now, since I did Trick last review, and I'm working in reverse order, I'm going to be doing Drive Angry. And this movie released in 2011. It was released by Summit Entertainment. And it was also released theatrically with the 3D gimmick. And there was a home media release of it in 3D. I just have the special edition version here because when it comes to 3D home media, I only pick out the ones that I think actually look good. And this movie's far from it in the 3D, even though it's more geared towards that. I think even more so than My Bloody Valentine was. But this is the copy I watched for the sake of reviewing. And I have to say, I haven't watched this movie in many years, but I usually watch the special features and the making of documentaries when I watch movies these days, just so I get a feel of what the creators were thinking when they go into making movies. And the backstory behind this one was Todd Farmer and Patrick Lussier met while making My Bloody Valentine 3D, and they wanted to keep the collaboration going further. They felt like they worked synergistically very well, and they had a couple of projects in the woodworks around this point in time, around the early 2010s. This was one of them. Halloween 3D was another one of them, and apparently there was a spec script with Hellraiser that they wrote as well. Now, the Hellraiser script and the Halloween 3D script never came to fruition, but I've watched the Pizzow interview that he did when he interviewed Patrick Lussier and Todd Farmer about Halloween 3D. And a fun fact about this, before I get into what the commentary said on this home release here, there was something on the lines of they had pretty much sold the script to Summit for Drive Angry. And it was getting about a few weeks out before they had to go pack up everything and go start filming and do what they needed to do to make the movie. Well, the Weinsteins in Dimension called them or contact them and ask if they would like to work on a potential third installment of the Rob Zombie Halloween universe that he created. And Todd Farmer took it upon himself to lock himself in his office for 8 days, only talking and collabing with Patrick Lussier on the phone and maybe interacting with a few of his family members, and finished the script for Halloween 3D in 8 days. And as the story goes, he turned it in on time, the Weinsteins liked it, and they pretty much were going to greenlit the movie. However, there was some consternation about them having to wait or something for the funds to be able to do Halloween 3D. So instead of putting Drive Angry on hold and potentially losing out on 2 movies as opposed to having one guaranteed movie and one potential one, they went ahead and just went off to film Drive Angry and hoped that when they got done and wrapped up with everything and the film released, maybe they'll come back and do Halloween 3D. Well, as the story goes, now this is stuff I've gathered over time, that this movie bombed so bad that when they went back to the Halloween 3D idea, Dimension pulled the plug, apparently, because the movie didn't make any money. And so the story goes, they got blamed, and as the theory goes on the internet, there's a common idea that maybe these two got blackballed from Hollywood, which is a shame, but if this is the movie that got him blackballed, I can kind of understand why. It's a very raunchy and sleazy movie. and it knows what it is. But when they said why they made the movie, I kind of cringed a little bit. So, after knowing about why they canned Halloween 3D and they didn't take the chance and just went ahead and made this movie, they literally said they wanted to keep themselves, working together, and they wanted to do something that's a throwback to 70s car movies. And the two sat down and spent 8 weeks on this script and turned it in after only one finalized draft and sold it. They didn't edit it or nothing. And that to me is mind-boggling. How the script was never edited and it was sent off and someone bought it. But I'm not shocked because this is kind of out of my wheelhouse to be reviewing. This is more of a action adventure movie, but there is a lot of gore in the movie. And there is a supernatural element kind of reminiscent to Marvel's Ghost Rider movies with Nicolas Cage that you can kind of call this pseudo-horror. Not quite, but there is some things about it that could be kind of scary, I guess. But in an alternate world, right, I would much rather have seen what we heard about for Halloween 3D over this movie because I'm really mixed on this one, if I'm being honest. I think I used to like this one more, and I'll get into why, but I remember seeing this in the theaters when it dropped. I saw it in 3D with my buddy Zach. We used to hang out all the time, and unfortunately, as you get older, sometimes friends drift apart, and me and him don't really see each other too much. We live a state apart. Life kind of drifts us apart, and that's sad, but we remember watching this movie, and I remember we got home from the theater because we used to live together, like as roommates. And he was really torn whether he liked the movie or not. And we went back like a week later to see it again. And we had a ball that time watching it because we knew what to expect. And it's just, it's a movie that knows what it is. It's not trying to be serious. It's not a movie you take serious whatsoever. But it's a movie you have fun with, right? And at least I can say that going forward before I get into a brief plot synopsis with no spoilers. I want you to go into this movie blind. I think most people will have a fun time in this movie. So give you kind of a rundown what this plot is about. The story starts off with a guy, he's a narrator, and he ends up being called the accountant in the film, and he's played by a guy named William Fichtner. And he really steals the show in this movie, even though this is a Nicolas Cage movie, I have to say. He is escaping pretty much the gates of hell to go into the real world to hunt down this man called Milton, who has escaped hell with a briefcase, but we don't know what's inside the briefcase. It might involve something of supernatural origin that might have some significance as to why this guy is chasing him. But Milton's pretty much hell-bent on hunting down this man. And he's played by, I have to look, Billy Burke. And he is this cult leader that's pretty much linked to the death of his daughter. And his daughter had a baby, which is his granddaughter that he's trying to protect from this cult leader. And Nick Cage plays Milton, and he goes throughout this movie just balls to the wall, in-your-face action, cheesy action, sleazy action, all in one. And he's going around mercilessly killing people with guns, all types of weapons. And, yeah, in a Nicolas Cage fashion. Well, anyway, he's trying to make it to this specific point where he gets information from, in the early scenes of the movie, where he pretty much blows up a truck full of these cult members and blows this guy's leg to pieces, and it's really gross. And he's interrogating him, he gets the information he needs, and he goes out in a blaze of glory, and he shoots at a gas line, and it blows up a car. And it takes him down to Texas, where the movie begins. I think it says it begins in, like, Oklahoma or Colorado or something. Well, he ends up in, like, Texas or Oklahoma somewhere. And Amber Heard's character, she's the female protagonist of the movie, is, like, this waitress. And she owns this 69 Charger. It's a beautiful black Charger. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous car in the film. And she has a piece of shit boyfriend who, you know, claims the car, but she makes the payments on it and it's actually hers. Well, she quits her job one day because her boss is a, you know, pervert piece of shit. And Milton happens to be there and offers to help fix her car when she tries to bolt out after she quits. And they end up getting together and going on this road trip type of movie after he fixes her car. And the characters start to bond over the fucked up shit they end up going through, trying to figure out where this cult leader ends up being at. And they go through some really raunchy shit, like some graphic on-screen sex scenes. I think there's 2 in this movie. It tops My Bloody Valentine 3D with that iconic 10-minute full frontal nudity scene. This one just pushes it even further. And they go through a lot of fucked up shit, and they end up pretty much cornering the guy, and you learn a lot about Milton and what it means to be somebody who escaped from hell. And eventually, the story ends up in a place where Milton and Amber Heard's character figure out the exact plan that's going on. They recruit some help that they need to do, and you realize what this all entails for Milton's character and what's going to become of him, and you'll learn that when the ending of the movie happens. So that's as far as I'll leave it, but that's what you're pretty much going to expect out of Drive Angry. Now, I guess I should go ahead and just get the elephant out of the room. This movie has some CGI moments to it. And when I say CGI, I mean pretty much all of the over-the-top action sequences you see in the movie. There's, I think, 4 or 5 humongous explosions. All of them are CGI'd, maybe minus a few that they actually did some explosions on site. But my God, I think I found one of the worst CGI'd sequences of scenes I have ever seen in my life. And what I'm talking about is this scene when you see the accountant driving this hydrogen tank truck. And you'll know what I'm talking about. And Milton and Amber Heard's character are in I think they're in a red Chevelle. They change cars at a certain point of the movie. And this sequence is so bad. The CGI in it looks so terrible, and it's made for 3D on top of it. That has to be the absolute worst CGI I've ever seen, next to some CGI I've seen in Taurus Entertainment movies. And that's saying a lot. Like, the CGI in this movie, geared towards the 3D, is terrible. This, I don't see how the two of them, they appear to have eyes for 3D movies, and I'm guessing that's why the Weinsteins wanted to kind of save Rob Zombie's universe after he went in there and sure made a fucking mess out of that. And they wanted to salvage it by going to these guys because of the financial success of My Bloody Valentine 3D. I can understand that. And I think the guys have a more slasher mind together after seeing My Bloody Valentine 3D and Trick. Those movies are way better constructed, and at least with My Bloody Valentine 3D, that's easily the best 3D horror movie I've ever seen personally. This is atrocious. This is just a gimmick movie to the core with its 3D, and I have to say, this possibly is one of the worst 3D movies I've ever seen, next to Friday the 13th Part 3D and Jaws 3D. I mean, for modern, real 3D technology, this is terrible. Absolutely terrible. And I have no words. I don't even have the 3D, like, to get I have the equipment to watch it in full effect if I wanted to buy the Blu-ray 3D, but I just know that even with that, I highly doubt it's going to look good. So, I'm fine with that. But this does come with special features, like there's this cool little Axis Drive Angry feature when this kind of a pet peeve about trying to get all the bonus features and the, making of documentary to make this review, because you have to sit there on this thing and just press buttons like a game in order to get the things you need to get for the information, and that was annoying. But this is fine. I'll pass on the 3D. I think the dialogue in this movie is probably the worst I've seen of the duo. And this was their first outing as trying to make something brand new that's not a remake or not a horror sequel like the Hellraiser script they wrote or Halloween 3D. This was something they came up from scratch, and they came up with this in 8 weeks with no edits whatsoever to the script. And it clearly shows. There's some dialogue in here that seems kind of like it was improv, because if I can only imagine if some of this dialogue was improv, how bad it must have been on the script. And I'll say this, some characters are so raunchy, that's to say the least, that, I don't know. I didn't really cringe with the dialogue, but you'll see certain characters, like there's this woman named Candy. She gets like traumatized in the movie. and her dialogue is atrocious. Okay? The lines they give that woman, even though she bears all, and I recognize actress, I forget her name, but she was on this show NYPD Blue, and I was like, oh my god, she's like bearing all, and like for like 6 to 10 minutes of this movie. But yeah, some dialogue is really bad in this movie, and I guess my last major negative with it, oh boy, this movie, I think on one hand is like a just turn your brain off action high octane movie, but it just feels so derivative of the genre. And when you look at the set pieces that you go throughout this movie into, everything feels like a country bumpkin small town windmill farmland location. Nothing feels nothing about it feels expansive. As a matter of fact, the places they go to in this movie, they go to like 2 motels with fucking sleazy ass names. They go to, I think, 3 redneck car garages. I have no words for this setting they chose. I guess they were going for those 70s movies like Bullet and Smokey and the Bandit, where it takes place in the backwoods and a bunch of places. Dukes of Hazzard. I can kind of see that in here. As a matter of fact, there's people, to be authentic, they had people, with rebel flags and stuff. And, I think, and especially in today's climate, I don't think Hollywood would touch this movie with a fucking 10-foot pole. Not only just for that, for the symbolism of that, but just for how, I guess, taboo this movie would be considered. I guess by the typical Hollywood shill audience. Now, one thing, I think we'll start with the positives, I think I love about this movie is that it's unapologetically sleazy. Now, sleazy movies are inherently divisive, and I get that. Sleaziness is definitely not a popular taste. It's an acquired taste to kind of sink your teeth into, but this movie knows what it is, and I've already said this. It knows what it is. It's unapologetically being what it is. And I found myself at numerous times of this film laughing, having fun with it. And that's all you can really ask for in a movie like this. I mean, I feel, thinking back on it and looking at some YouTube reviews on this and some online reviews, I feel like people really beat up the tone of the movie, surprisingly. I'm like, why would you beat this movie up for what it's trying to be? That's one thing I don't get. I get if you don't like it, you can say it like that, but beating it up and saying that, oh, this is like a direction problem they took with the film. Why would you want to see a serious toned Nicolas Cage movie about a vengeful spirit trying to escape hell and stuff? If you want to see something like that, go watch the Ghost Rider movies. That's pretty much the closest thing I can give you there. But this, for what it was, it had its clear, just eye-rolling moments. But it was fun. I'll give it that. It's a fun fucking movie. But I don't know. I guess if I had any more positives with it, I can tell that the passion where it did work, I think, went down into some of the gore effects in this movie. The gore effects were actually pretty good for an action movie, even though some sequences are painful to watch the CGI through. Like, you'll see the cliche bullet being shot from a gun, and you see it twirling in the air like this. It has some words written on the bullet, shit like that. But the gore, when it was practical, was fucking awesome. You saw people's limbs get blown off. Now, there are some scenes where you see CGI hands blown off and shit. It's more of a 70-30 mix compared to My Bloody Valentine 3D that they did there, which was more like a 60-40 with practical to CGI. In this case, it's 70% CGI to 30% practical. But when the gore was there, it was spectacular. Now, I don't know if Gary Tunnicliffe worked on this movie with them, but I do remember seeing a name, Nathan Edmondson, who said that he worked on the special effects of this movie. Now, I don't know if he did the CGI, I don't know if he did the practical, but I guess I'll give him and the team credit here as a group The practical, when it was there, was really solid. Now, another technical aspect I think I could give to it is the soundtrack at points was kind of generic, but there were some fun songs thrown in there, like the "Sucking on My Titty" song. You know that song? I think I first heard that movie in a Jackass movie somewhere. There's some really fun songs throughout this movie to kind of just enrich that campiness tone to it, which kind of helped counterbalance the plot going on in the story. On one hand, you had an over-the-top action, high-octane, just constantly moving, constant noise movie. But on the other hand, you had a story about vengeance. You had a story about retribution. You had a you had a story that kind of goes into pseudo horror, where you have pretty much a plot that involves bringing hell to earth. And there's some supernatural bits that you can kind of throw into that mix, where it kind of feels like an action movie, feels like a supernatural movie, a sleazy B movie, all in one. Very Grindhouse-esque. If you've ever seen those Robert Rodriguez movies, this would fit right in there. I think that's what they were going for, too. I see a lot of that in this movie's veins, too, now that I think about it. But all in all, I don't really have much else to say about this film other than if you go in with the lowest expectations, I think you'll come out liking it a whole lot more than if you go in thinking that, oh, this is a Nicolas Cage movie. We all know he has some tremendous highs with his films and some tremendous lows. And I think a lot of people these days might not want to support the film because it has Amber Heard in it. The controversy set aside, she's not that bad in this movie. Her acting was pretty tolerable. Same thing with Nicolas Cage. Is not one of his groundbreaking performances. I don't think he really played up the sleaziness that he could have all the way, but he was sleazy enough. And I think that this is probably one of the more middle-of-the-road Nicolas Cage movies that I've seen. If we're just talking about Nicolas Cage being the front runner of movies. I just recently watched Renfield a while back, and I do plan on making a review of that at some point in the future, but I really enjoyed that movie. That's one of my favorite Nick Cage movies I've seen in a while. Maybe next to, like, Color Out of Space or something. But, yeah, this movie, I don't know. If I'm being honest, it's kind of like, this movie kind of fits the slasher genre, where you don't really want to find yourself critiquing the movie too seriously, especially when the movie's up front being just a guilty pleasure, gore porn, action thriller type of movie. But, if I'm being honest, there's way better in this niche genre out there that kind of fit this over-the-top, high-octane sleaziness that this movie's exuding from top to bottom. There's way better ones out there, in my opinion. The Grindhouse movies, both of them, I would watch those over this. But that's not taking anything away. I don't think this is necessarily a bad movie, but I don't think it's a good movie either. But I have a lot of respect for it because I'm such a big, massive fan of Todd Farmer and Patrick Lussier that I own this movie and I do watch it quite often. It's just an easy to watch, turn your brain off type of movie. I don't really feel a strong way either way. I'm very in the middle on it. So I'll probably give this movie like a solid 3 out of 5 stars. Now, you normally aren't going to see 3 out of 5 star reviews from me unless it's something I really am interested in or have creators I'm really interested in as well. But, yeah, go watch this if you haven't seen it before. You might enjoy it. If you ask me personally, I would have much rather seen a reality where they took the chance on Halloween 3D and maybe postponed doing Drive Angry to get that film, because what we got with My Bloody Valentine 3D and Trick are way better than this. But I digress. Yeah, so that's my thoughts on Drive Angry. Let me know down in the comment section. Have you seen this movie before? Do you love it or do you hate it? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.